Hey everyone, we're going to do part two of Betsy Ross and Paul Revere. And where we last left off was how these individuals were remembering themselves and they were remembering multiple past lives. And then they were remembering how to communicate in a way unknown. And it was intuitive, it was instinctive, it was high intuitive hearing, it was a type of energy. Transmission that they would say, and what we would call energy transmission would be a layman's terms of energy work and communicating through energy and being connected to them in what we would call telekinesis. And telekinesis would be they had such clear minds back then that they knew if somebody was intoxicated immediately. So they can just upon a look, just know and have this type of body language communication. And it was 100% correct and clear. And what was happening was the intercepting and the interference of that type of communication. So when I said that Betsy Ross kept a flag up her skirt, it was something of pertinent to her. Well, Paul Revere had his own way, and it had to do with a lantern. Now, when we lead it through, when we were talking about the Salem witch trials and how they were not allowed to communicate, and it was such a game, and everyone was stoic and rock hard, and it was stay put orders, and it was uh, all of what we call unbeknownst. I saw how it trickled down, and there was kind of like a backstory where we see from the crucible where they all made it into court, and then they had the death penalty upon them. But I am seeing that it took many years to get to that point, and then it trickled into history of Boston Harbor, and then it trickled into Paul Revere, and then it trickled back into Betsy Ross, into what we know the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. So first, we're going to ask, did those individuals who were part of the witch trials, who were criminal of intent, come back through Betsy Ross's time and also Paul Revere's time? I hear a yes and a no, and you weren't to know it. So then when I asked them, well, what about the crone? The CRON, and it's not to know it, KNOW, which means it was a pertinence B. And a pertinence B was meant to be a BEA, but it really was a BEE. So they were stinging again. What was your pertinence and what was a gift pertinent to you? Now, it was centered around a lot of unhappiness. I'm seeing one fool, as they said, he went down the road, and I see a jug of liquids that was what they call alcohol, and he was conjuring spirits. He went to go complete a cycle to gain luck. His luck had run out after being intoxicated. The Seven of Cups, and I see people like starting like and that is how strong like something came out of him, like his soul just like pertinent, and they're like it's not even him. And that with the Seven of Cups is like a lack of options. You just have to do it. And those were still what we hear today out in the community, out in areas that we go and work. Like you just can't do it. And that's when I usually say, well, spell it. So I know exactly what is meant to be. That is where a lot of it came through. And that is where their high intuitive skills of like intuitive downloads, because they were showing me what they would call like intuitive savants, or but they're not savant or autistic like. They're people who could literally just rattle it off, the information and the education. That's why they didn't really go to school, I hear. And I'm like, no, they don't. No, they don't. And that's a little bit of interference. Somebody does not want me to talk about this today. So with that being said, I just push on. With the Ace of Swords, it is a put out. It is a put out. They are not to have this start whatsoever. Whatsoever. The Knight of Swords is I put it into the ground, and it's still as of today. So when I go and I look and I let it be known and I'm gauging, when I look at it, it was all about farm stock, livestock, agriculture for the Revolutionary War and the Civil War during those times. For Salem, it was about travel. So, what about agriculture and farming gets the wish where we need it? And it has to do with detriment. Detriment is a ritual, it is a rite, R-I-T-E, it is a curse, it is a ceremony, and it's usually only used in a time of war. And when you use it in a time of war, it is effective where you have no agriculture, you have no farming, you have bad soil, it becomes acidic because they have to use a certain amount of explosive ordnance after writing something to make it solidified. But you must do detriment in a group. That is why usually the military was using it as an advancement force. So when only one uses it and puts it upon an area that is not of in a time of war, that is such high criminal intent, you have to sit and wait. And that usually makes a lot of mental health illnesses. It makes a lot of physical illnesses. It makes a lot of sense. It has such ill emotions set around it that you just can't understand that destabilization. And it's so slow. You start getting what they called biblically, it was like insect infestation, rodent infestation. They you can't, nothing grows properly. It can actually disrupt weather patterns because you have to use sorcery, you have to use wizard, you have to use warlock to end it, and then you have to use high priestess to close the gap. So they're showing me one of their oxen in around 1700s, and it had to do with the eyes, and that is how they picked up that there was something wrong. And then when that happened, it was the type of constriction of the pupil and the dilation of it. And it actually, with the color of the eyes, the iris, it changed color like a ring, like a hue. Now they said, what type of mat? And he goes, yep, that is how they would do it. All of a sudden, you would start talking, and it would literally be this. Someone put words in my mouth. I was already looking at the livestock and I was looking at everything, and I just can't even do it. And they're like, just do it. You already know it. And that was usually the basis of war. And then they would be put on a stay put order. Usually with detriment, they're put on a stay put order. It's a feeling of you cannot leave. Now, with the 10 of cups, you can't even understand the disrupt in the family. Usually that is when they had multiple husbands, multiple wives, a lot of death. That is when in the 1800s, it was very common for a spouse to be like, I'm passing away and you need to take on another spouse. And it was acceptable. It was very acceptable, and it did not consider polygamy. A lot of times it was a brother to stay into the family because it was inheritance, it was lineage. It was considered such gold. back then that you couldn't understand it. So the Page of Swords comes in, and that is when young individuals rose up and said, I'm going to take care of it because I'm healthy. And it took a toll on my family members who are older than me, which is very common still today. But they started to struggle really bad. And it was such a set in to them. But I'm not seeing a set into the mind, like mind control into the body, where they can't do anything. So the Knight of Pentacles shows they just couldn't offer anything good. They could not offer anything good. The Hermit literally comes through as staying indoors, but then they would lose everything, everything. Now, when it comes back up, when they start looking in the wells and uh they had to like do a distillery to make pure water because it was unclean water from detriment. And when that happened, you had to say it was a lot of female energy. It was usually the females who did it, the high priestesses. So, what would cause them to say, we have every right, RIGHT, to cause this type of illness of everything? And it was the Nine of Pentacles. It was, I remembered it and I remembered you, and that you owe me this and you won't give it to me. And they're like, that was 400 years ago. It's not pertinent to today. And that is still going on. That has to do with a lot of the affiliates. And when they do these things, they say, I took an illegal substance and then I remembered it because I connected well to source. And then we have to say, what is your source? And that was the same argument each decade, each era. It was just like they're like, this is just a continuance on. And that is when councils would come through and they would have to say only pertinent to males. And so then it would be stay in your lane. And then it would be only females. And then it would only be kids throw a rock. And when they would go outside and play, they would actually watch it. Because in a past life habit, there was a habit with Salem that they had picked up on, that there was male and female all within each other, and you couldn't tell the difference if they were male or female. And then they would say it was a curse. And they're like, it's not a curse upon you or within you. It was a free right choice. So with the Four of Pentacles, where was the security at? And so when they guide my right towards as a psychic and you're looking out at the country, where was that security with land and agriculture? And they're like, munitions? They went, yes and no. Let's ask the Native Americans. So, with that being said, it was the oxen, it was the death, it was the Perth, it was the Benoth, it was the the T, the Nye, the guy to be the lie. And that is what got you in. And when during those eras, they would say that that's all they had to say, that those people knew exactly what to do and how to clear themselves properly. Um, they all agreed that it all started as a root of addiction. It had to do with they had done criminal activity prior. And when they had done criminal activity prior, they were losing gifts and abilities that were pertinent to their soul, that were like almost like an identifier. So when it came down to, it went to, you're doing witchcraft. And they're like, I'm not doing witchcraft. I am looking about and I heard it, I felt it, I saw it. I didn't cast out. but this is ill nostalgia. And that is where the argument would start. So, with that being said, that energy is it all boiled down to justice. Like there was a form of justice that everyone was looking for to get it done. And to get it done is up to war, to cause a war. Now, with that being said, what you need to know by looking through the crystal, they would look through clear water, which brings me back down to Clearwater, Florida. But really, it goes up to the lakes. And when you would look at the lakes and the way of the flow of the ripple, you have to go Benone. And Benone meant in Native American language that the wind cycles would come through, and the Native Americans were very in tune with the land, with the earth. They understood earth magic and how it was deceptive. So you had to pay attention. So even just looking on the uptick of the leaves meant that there was something coming through, a storm. It didn't mean like a storm, like rain, wind, and hail. A storm could be a negative energy coming through, and that's all they needed to know. Now, with that being said, you have to go Perth. And when Perth went through there, that is where they started learning in that equal give and take. That equal give and take between the settlers and the Native Americans came through. And as time went on, you'll understand what settlers mean and what Native American means. It's so different, even up to Indian. Now, as we're kind of deterring, you can see there's a lot of interference. Some of it's really good and some of it's really bad. That means it's a circle about, that means slow down. And they would give that hand signal. And they would do this. And they would do this. And that is what they're showing me as a psychic act out in mediumship. And when they would do that, it would be almost like a marionette puppet. And then they said, you did something, you ate something, you drank something to make you like that because you don't connect to me like that. And they would be like, at that point, it went to a whole new level of everything. So when they did that, they were finding that they were ingesting things that should not be ingested, like a form of pica. And that is where Betsy Ross is like, just Jennifer, just stop it. Just stop it. Just stop it. You just can't understand it at all on how I would go out in the field and I would eat it. And she had this like type of like hard talking, and they would just eat it and it would rot everything, rot their teeth till it bounced down. And that's how she would talk, because she had so much hard energy sent to her that she talked hard. She absorbed that energy. Now we'll go to the wood runes. Living through all of that goes through in a way unknown. And it was such a flip of the turn of a coin, like this faded rune, that the estate and the heritage would have power. And all of a sudden you hear, and you couldn't even do it. You would sit there and you would have like physical symptoms of blindness. You would have physical symptoms of vestibular damage. You would have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. You would have like smallpox, fevers, um, a type of mental health where they would just call it out and start screaming and pop off at you. And that is where they started getting defensive. And during the day, it was worse, but they knew if they did it at night, they were doing something to obscure it. And it was a type of trolling when they did it at night, and it to cause a freeze. And that is why it popped off into that escalation of the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, because it was a battle of who was right, who was wrong, of a type of enslavement. It was right to being represented properly. So who was representing who properly? Was it like me? Like I could, they would literally walk in and say, "Well, you're Jennifer," and I say, "No, no, I'm Stephen today." Yeah, he speaks through me, and they would write something out. So is no taxation without representation. And then it went to travel. You're not allowed to travel outside the township. You have to stay in the town. So those were the basis of the war. Gifting was really easy. They had no problem with gifting. Birch, like I'm seeing sarsaparilla, the drink, the birch beer was so like cleansing for them. They actually got addicted to it and they would pop off. It would literally end everything that they were sent by drinking birch beer and sarsaparilla. It would, that's what a lot of them cause havoc. And then that's when you had issues with the transportation of goods. And it, you know, that warrior was so good at their pertinence and all of it that we could just drink something that was grown, that's non-intoxicating. It was DONE. But that's what happens when they get intoxicated, when they have such high amp of the mind and the body. And then they come down, they have their brilliant ideas at their highest amp, and then they become so ridiculously comical on boiling it down to a word and boiling it down to something of picking up a pen, and it went out there. So then when they would catch the end of something, they would pick up the pen and say, "Caught you." And that is what was the hidden game, is catching the ending of what was sent to them. And that is what brought them joy. So they would just sit there and they're like, "No, no, just let it play out. Just let it me take the hit." And then I'll live about, and we make by, and we go by, and then we go done. And that is how they would troll them. And that is how they used to get angst among the ranks. And it's still common today. It's still common today. It's like a form of luck. It's called war games. And it's usually like I see the Invictus games too, a little bit. And it flows well. It flows well when they do it. It literally ashes. So they would take ashes and they would just stir it, and they would see exactly what's going on. And then they would literally have luck. They would literally have luck. It was so good that you just can't even do it. It was so strong. And that is where they want me to end. It's going to be a very short video today, because it's leading really hard and fast to other figures and what they were pertinent on making this so solidified in these wars, with the continuance on what they had seen at Salem, Massachusetts, that it leads all the way into what they're showing me by one gentleman. He's still got this blonde hair that you just can't understand it at all. And he goes, "You just can't understand it." It went to, yeah, He goes, just stop right there, Jennifer. You're gonna be here all day if you lead right into World War II of how it's always a continuance on of picking up, but it's not a continuous. So other than that, have a great day, and we'll look for part three within the next 1 to 2 weeks, and we'll talk about how it more significant figures helped Betsy Ross and Paul Revere on solidifying what they needed to do.